The ballroom glittered like a dream pulled straight from a magazine cover. Chandeliers dripped crystals overhead, scattering fragments of light across polished marble floors. Rows of white roses lined the aisle, their petals perfumed with promises of eternity. Guests in sleek gowns and sharp tuxedos leaned forward in anticipation, their eyes pinned on the radiant bride at the altar. Elena's hands trembled as she clutched the bouquet of lilies. Beneath the veil, her eyes shimmered with unshed tears of joy, not sorrow. For a girl who had grown up with little more than hand-me-down dresses and second-hand dreams, this day felt like proof that miracles existed. Adrian Cole, the man she loved, the man every business journal called untouchable, had chosen her. She whispered to herself, steadying her nerves. This is it. My forever begins now. Adrian stood beside her, impossibly handsome in his tailored charcoal suit. His jawline was sharp as a blade, his eyes like shards of ice beneath the spotlight. He looked every inch the billionaire CEO composed, controlled, the master of his world. Elena thought she saw the faintest smile curve his lips, and it made her heart pound harder. The priest's voice echoed across the hushed hall. Do you, Adrian Cole, take this woman? But before the words could be finished, Adrian's hand slipped from Elena's. The room gasped collectively, a ripple of confusion spreading through the crowd. Adrian turned his head not toward Elena, but toward a figure striding confidently down the aisle. Selena. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Her best friend since childhood. The woman who had helped her pick this very gown, who had promised to stand at her side today. Selena's crimson dress clung to her curves like a second skin, scandalous against the sea of ivory and black. She smirked, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Adrian reached for her hand. Stop this farce, he said coldly, his voice carrying easily across the stunned silence. Selena is the woman I want by my side, not her. His head tilted toward Elena, dismissive, as if she were no more than a stranger. The bouquet slipped from Elena's grip, scattering petals across the marble floor. Gasps turned into whispers, then laughter. Bitter, mocking laughter. He left her for the bridesmaid done. Someone hissed. I knew she wasn't good enough for him, another sneered. She thought she could marry a Cole. What a joke. The sting of their words cut deeper than any knife. Elena stood frozen, her body refusing to move, her mind begging to wake from a nightmare that felt too vivid. Idra. Her voice cracked. This isn't funny. Tell me this isn't. It's the truth. He interrupted, his tone like frost. His gaze swept over her cold, appraising, cruel. You never belonged in my world, Elena. Did you really think you could? Selena has always been the one. She has ambition. She understands me. You were a mistake. Selena leaned into him, her laugh ringing like a bell meant to taunt. Don't look so shocked, darling. Men like Adrian don't settle for plain, fragile girls playing princess. The guests erupted against them with scandalized murmurs, others with gleeful laughter, eager to feast on the spectacle. Cameras flashed, phones lifted to capture her humiliation forever. Elena's knees weakened. She could barely breathe as shame pressed down on her chest like a vice. All those nights she had stayed awake, imagining their life together. All the sacrifices, the hope, the trust, shattered with a single gesture. And then it happened. A man near the back, holding a glass of champagne, raised it mockingly and called out, "To the real bride." He flung the drink high, and crimson liquid arced through the air before splattering across Elena's gown. White silk bloomed into red, a violent stain that looked horrifyingly like blood. The crowd roared with laughter. Tears blurred Elena's vision. She clutched at the ruined fabric, her throat burning with shame. She wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but her voice drowned in the tide of jeers. Adrian didn't flinch. He didn't step forward to shield her. He simply tightened his grip on Selena's hand, pride gleaming in his eyes as if he had finally aligned himself with the right woman. The priest, awkward and pale, stammered. Maybe we should. There is nothing to continue. Adrian cut him off. This wedding is over. Alina felt the ground sway beneath her feet. The roses, the chandeliers, the polished marble, all of it blurred into a cruel parody of the fairy tale she had once believed in. Her fairy tale had ended before it began. Someone muttered, "Look at her face, pathetic. Serves her right for reaching above her station." Another agreed. Their words clawed at her ears. She turned, desperate to escape, but every pair of eyes followed, every phone camera recorded, immortalizing her downfall. The veil that had once symbolized purity now felt like a shroud suffocating her. Alina tore it off, her hands shaking violently, and let it fall to the ground. She forced her feet to move, one step, then another, toward the grand doors. Her spine trembled, but she willed it straight. If they wanted a broken girl, she wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her collapse. Behind her, Adrian's voice carried once more, "Forget her. She was never meant to be part of this world." Selina laughed sweetly, pressing a kiss to his cheek. "Come, darling. Let them watch what perfection looks like." The doors slammed shut behind Alina, cutting off the sound of their laughter, but not its echo in her heart. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp, biting into her skin. She stumbled down the marble steps, her gown heavy with spilled wine and humiliation, and fell to her knees beneath the starlight. For a long moment, she could only sob into her hands, the taste of salt and bitterness flooding her mouth. She had lost everything in the span of a single heartbeat, her love, her dignity, her future, and yet, somewhere deep inside the hollow ruin of her chest, a spark refused to die. As tears streamed down her face, Alina whispered into the night, "This is not the end of me." Her voice broke, but the words lingered, trembling with defiance. She didn't know then what the future held. She didn't know of the battles she would fight, or the children she would bring into the world. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she would rise again. The city lights blurred behind her as the cab rattled away from the coal estate. Alina pressed her forehead against the chilled window, clutching the small clutch bag she had brought to what was supposed to be her wedding. Inside it, she had a lipstick, a phone, and $23 in cash. Nothing else. The veil was gone, left on the ballroom floor like discarded evidence of her shame. The gown clung to her body, sticky with wine and sweat, smelling faintly of roses and humiliation. She didn't cry anymore. She had done that until her eyes burned raw. Now she simply stared out, her face pale and blank, like a porcelain doll dropped and cracked, but still intact. When the driver asked for her destination, she croaked out the name of the cheapest motel she knew from a former coworker's story. He looked at her through the rearview mirror, suspicion flickering in his eyes, but he didn't question it. To him, she was just another runaway bride. The motel smelled of mildew and fried onions. The carpet was stained, the sheets scratchy. Alina didn't care. She locked the door, collapsed onto the bed, and curled up, her stomach aching from hunger she hadn't noticed until then. She wanted to sleep, to erase the day, but the images replayed on a cruel loop. Adrian's cold eyes, Selina's triumphant smirk, the laughter, the sting of champagne turning her gown into a bloodied rag. By morning, the tabloids were everywhere. Photos of Adrian and Selina holding hands at the altar, captions that screamed, "CEO dumps bride for maid of honor," and from best friend to bride, Selina's shocking steal. They shredded what little dignity Alina had left. Her phone buzzed with messages. Family members, enraged. Friends, demanding explanations. Strangers, spewing hate. Gold digger, they called her. Pathetic. Serves you right. She turned the phone off, stuffed it into the drawer, and never touched it again. Days blurred into weeks. She picked up temp jobs waitressing, cleaning offices, anything that kept her afloat. She rented a cramped studio with peeling wallpaper and a single window that overlooked a brick wall. Nights were long and silent. Sometimes she stared at the ceiling until dawn, wondering how love had turned into ruin so fast. And then one morning, as she leaned over the sink scrubbing dishes from a diner shift, nausea hit her like a tidal wave. She barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting. At first, she blamed spoiled food. But when the sickness lingered for days, gnawing at her with unrelenting force, dread coiled inside her. At the pharmacy, her hands shook as she bought the test. Back in her apartment, she waited, pacing in the narrow space, chewing her lip until it bled. When the second line appeared, bold and unmistakable, Alina sank to the floor, pregnant, her breath hitched. Memories flooded her. Night Adrian had whispered promises against her skin. The way he had kissed her like she was his salvation. Promises broken, lies exposed. Now, proof of that night grew inside her. For hours, she sat in silence, clutching the small stick. Fear clawed at her, but beneath it, something else stirred. Resolve. He may have humiliated me. He may have abandoned me. But this child is mine, and I will love it enough for both of us. The first months were hell. Morning sickness didn't wait for morning. It ravaged her at all hours. She vomited behind dumpsters during lunch breaks, excused herself from offices to retch in bathroom stalls. Coworkers whispered that she was weak, unreliable. Some employers cut her shifts. Rent loomed like a monster she couldn't outrun. She learned to ration food. Half a sandwich saved for later, soup stretched for 3 meals. She drank water to fill her stomach when hunger gnawed too loudly. Nights, she lay in bed, palm over her abdomen, whispering apologies to the life inside her. I'm trying. I'll do better tomorrow. Just hold on. As her belly swelled, strangers stared. Landlords eyed her suspiciously. Job offers dried up. Nobody wanted to hire a pregnant woman with no family, no husband, no story worth believing. One evening, after being dismissed from yet another interview, Alina trudged home in the rain. Her shoes were soaked, her coat thin. She slipped on the steps to her apartment, landing hard, and for one terrifying moment, she thought she had lost the baby. She sobbed all night, cradling her stomach, begging silently for the child to survive. The baby did. The heartbeat thundered strong during the rare clinic visits she could afford. Relief washed over her in hot tears. The day of delivery came on a biting winter night. Snow drifted against the hospital windows, the world outside silent and white. Alina labored for hours, her cries muffled into the thin pillow. No hand to hold, no voice to soothe. The nurses were brisk, professional, detached. She wasn't a VIP bride here. No cameras, no roses. Just another struggling single woman bringing life into the world. When at last the cries of her first son pierced the room, Elena's chest heaved with sobs. Minutes later, another cry followed the second twin, smaller but fierce. 2 boys. 2 reasons to keep living. She named them Noah and Nathaniel. Tiny fists curled around her trembling fingers, their warmth anchoring her to the earth. Exhaustion swallowed her, but joy flickered like a fragile flame. You'll never be alone, she whispered, even if the world rejects us. We have each other. But motherhood was not merciful. Her body ached, breast sore and cracked from nursing. Nights were endless, punctuated by wails that pulled her from half-sleep. Diapers piled, formula ran low, bills mounted. Alina pawned the last piece of jewelry she owned, a simple silver bracelet her mother had given her. With the money, she bought formula and paid rent. Tears blurring her eyes as she handed over the heirloom. Neighbors complained about the crying. Landlords threatened eviction. Some nights, she rocked both boys in her arms, singing lullabies with a voice hoarse from exhaustion, praying they would fall asleep before dawn. There were moments she thought she couldn't go on. Moments she stood over their cribs, shaking with fatigue, whispering, I can't do this. I can't. But then Noah would grip her finger, or Nathaniel would open his tiny eyes and blink up at her with blind trust, and strength surged where she thought none remained. The weeks after Noah and Nathaniel's birth blurred together into a haze of sleepless nights and aching days. Alina lived in a rhythm dictated entirely by the twins' cries. At 2 in the morning, at 4, at 6 she woke to their tiny voices demanding food, warmth, comfort. Her body, still raw from labor, throbbed with pain each time she bent to lift them. Her hands cracked from constant washing, her back stiff from hours of rocking them. There was no partner to share the load, no family member knocking at her door with casseroles or lullabies. She was alone, and alone she fought through every hour. Money became her fiercest enemy. Formula was expensive, diapers, an endless drain. The hospital bills had been staggering, even at the cheapest clinic. Alina calculated costs obsessively, scribbling numbers in a frayed notebook, cutting corners wherever she could. She ate less, so her babies could eat more, skipped rent some months, and begged her landlord for extensions. Patched her only coat with thread she found in a second-hand store. Her apartment was no place for infants, drafty, damp, infested with the occasional roach, but it was all she could afford. She stuffed towels under the windows to keep the cold from creeping in, bundled the boys in layers of donated clothes, and prayed they wouldn't fall sick. One night, the heat went out. The air grew so cold that her breath turned visible in the dim light. She pressed both boys against her chest, wrapping them in her own blanket, her body shivering violently as she whispered, "It's okay, Mommy's here. I'll keep you warm." She stayed awake until dawn, terrified they would freeze if she let go. When food ran out, she walked miles to the church pantry, pushing the stroller with frozen fingers. Volunteers smiled, handed her canned beans and rice, offered second-hand baby clothes. Their kindness kept her afloat, but it also deepened the ache of humiliation. She had once dreamed of a honeymoon in Paris, of champagne toasts and gala dinners. Now, her life was measured in diapers and dialed bread. The exhaustion was relentless. She fell asleep sitting upright, babies nestled in her arms, and startled awake when one whimpered. Sometimes, she cried quietly in the dark, the sound swallowed by the hum of the radiator. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I'm not strong enough." But every time she looked down and saw Noah's tiny fist clinging to her shirt, or Nathaniel's eyes blinking up at her, she found another scrap of strength. Work was a necessity, even though leaving the twins tore her apart. She found part-time jobs typing invoices from home, sewing buttons for a garment factory, anything that could be done while the boys napped. Paychecks were meager, but she stretched every cent, determined never to fail them. Neighbors whispered. Some pitied her, others sneered. "Poor thing," they said, shaking their heads. What did she expect, running off with a billionaire? No wonder he left her. Alina ignored them. Gossip wouldn't buy formula. Gossip wouldn't keep her babies fed. The worst nights were when one of the twins got sick, feverish, wailing, their tiny bodies burning in her arms. She would pace the floor, rocking them, cooling their foreheads with damp cloths, praying fever dreams away. The clinic visits emptied what little savings she had, but she never hesitated. If she had to go hungry for a week, so be it. They mattered more than anything. Slowly, painfully, she learned the rhythms of survival. She learned to swaddle perfectly, to soothe colic with gentle back rubs, to budget every dime. Her body bore the toll sunken cheeks, purple shadows under her eyes, but her spirit hardened at night. After the twins finally drifted off, she sat by the window, the city's neon glow bleeding through the curtains. She thought of Adrian sometimes, of his icy stare, of Selina's smug laugh, but the anger burned less with each passing day. What replaced it was resolve. "I don't need him," she whispered. "We don't need him. We'll make it on our own." And deep down, she believed it. The day she brought the twins home from the hospital, snow still clung stubbornly to the sidewalks. The stroller rattled over uneven concrete as she pushed, her hands raw from the cold. Strangers glanced at her, some offering polite smiles, others frowning at the sight of a young woman alone with 2 infants. Alina kept her gaze straight ahead. Inside the apartment, she lowered the boys into their thrift store crib, a chipped wooden frame she had scrubbed clean and lined with soft blankets. The space smelled faintly of bleach and baby powder. It wasn't much, but it was safe, and it was theirs. She stood over them for a long time, watching their tiny chests rise and fall, marveling at the miracle of their existence. That first week was a blur of cries and diapers. Noah and Nathaniel seemed to take turns waking, as though conspiring to ensure their mother never slept more than 20 minutes at a stretch. Alina shuffled through the days in a fog, her hair unwashed, her eyes ringed with dark circles. Her body still ached from labor stitches pulling, muscles sore, but there was no time to rest. Survival demanded every ounce of her. At 3 a.m., she rocked Noah in her arms, while Nathaniel wailed in the crib. At 5, she switched, soothing Nathaniel while Noah fussed. By sunrise, she was dizzy with exhaustion, whispering lullabies in a cracked voice. Sometimes tears slid down her face, hot and silent, dripping onto the baby's blankets. Meals were often nothing more than toast and weak tea. She sold her last pair of heels, the ones she had once dreamed of wearing to corporate galas to pay for formula. The glamour of her past life felt like a cruel joke now. Yet, when she cradled her sons, felt their warm bodies nestle against her chest, she knew she would endure anything for them. The apartment became a battlefield of necessity. Stacks of diapers piled against the wall, bottles boiled on the stove. A laundry line stretched across the living room, tiny clothes swaying like flags of surrender. The radiator clanked and hissed, but rarely offered enough heat, so she bundled the boys in layers of mismatched sweaters, tucking them close to her body at night. There were moments of beauty hidden in the struggle. The first time Noah smiled, gumming his lips in a crooked grin that melted her exhaustion. The way Nathaniel reached out, clutching her finger with surprising strength. Their eyes, still a soft blue, searched her face as though memorizing every feature. In those moments, Alina felt fierce pride. She was their entire world, and they were hers. But the world outside was not gentle. On her rare walks to the clinic, she felt the sting of judgment in strangers' stares. Some offered pity, others disdain. A woman in the waiting room whispered loudly to her friend, another single mother. No ring, of course. Alina pretended not to hear, but the words lodged deep inside. One evening, when both boys were finally asleep, she sat at the table with a pad of paper. She wrote down every expense: rent, utilities, food, medical bills. The numbers stared back like vultures. No matter how she rearranged them, there wasn't enough. Her chest tightened, panic clawing at her throat. She pressed her palms to her face, whispering, "I can't do this. I can't." But then a faint whimper came from the crib. She rushed over, smoothing Nathaniel's blanket, stroking his tiny cheek. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. But when his mouth curved in a sleepy half-smile, her despair cracked. Strength returned, fragile but real. "Yes, I can," she murmured. "For you, I can." Days turned into months. Slowly, Alina found a rhythm. She learned to nap in short bursts, to cook in bulk, to stretch every dollar until it screamed. She bartered with neighbors, mending clothes in exchange for babysitting, sharing meals in exchange for errands. Pride had to be swallowed. Survival mattered more. The twins grew stronger. Their cries filled the apartment with life. Their laughter, rare but precious, became the music that carried her through dark nights. Every milestone felt like a triumph. The first time they rolled over, the first babbled syllables that made her heart swell. Still, the shadow of Adrian lingered. Sometimes, when exhaustion dragged her down, She would imagine what life might have been if he had stayed, if he had chosen her, if he had stood beside her. But the thought always ended the same, with the memory of his cold voice at the altar, dismissing her as nothing. That memory fueled her resolve. She would not be nothing, not for her boys. One stormy evening, as thunder rattled the windows, she sat by the crib and whispered, "One day, I'll give you a better life, a safe home, warm meals, schools that don't leak when it rains. I don't know how yet, but I will, I promise." Her voice trembled, but the vow burned in her chest. The boys stirred, their breaths even and steady. Outside, lightning lit the sky, but inside, the small apartment, Alina felt a strange calm. She had been broken once, humiliated before the world. But here, with her son sleeping soundly, she was whole again, and though the path ahead was steep, she knew she would climb it, step by step, sacrifice by sacrifice, until the world no longer saw her as the girl abandoned at the altar, but as a woman who had built a life from ashes. Spring crept into the city slowly, melting the last of the gray slush into trickles along the gutters. Alina stood by the cracked window of her apartment, watching sunlight spill across the rooftops. For the first time in months, she felt the faint stirrings of hope. Noah and Nathaniel were 6 months old, now still fragile, but stronger with each passing day. Their laughter filled the cramped space like music, chasing away the silence that had once suffocated her. The struggle was far from over. Every bill that arrived in the mail reminded her how thin the line between survival and disaster truly was. But Alina had begun to find her footing. She'd pieced together a patchwork of work-from-home jobs, typing, proofreading, even stitching small garments for a factory that paid by the piece. At night, she studied law books, borrowed from the library, determined to pick up where her dreams had collapsed. It was during one of her weary trips to the clinic that she met him. Nathan Hayes was a young doctor, still completing his residency. He had sandy brown hair that never seemed to lie flat, and eyes the warm shade of honey. When he first walked into the exam room, Alina was too exhausted to notice much beyond the white coat and the reassuring calm he carried. Noah had been running a fever, his tiny body trembling in her arms. Panic had hollowed her chest, making it hard to breathe. Nathan crouched low, his voice gentle. "Hey there, little man," he said, touching Noah's forehead with careful fingers. "You've had a rough night, haven't you?" Alina blinked. No doctor had ever spoken like that before, not just to her, but to her child, as though the baby mattered, as though he wasn't just another chart. Nathan's tone soothed her more than any medicine could. The exam was swift, professional, a mild infection, nothing serious. Prescriptions written, instructions explained. But what lingered with Alina was the way Nathan had looked at her, direct, without pity, without judgment. He didn't see a scandal, or a girl who'd been left at the altar. He saw a mother trying desperately to hold her world together. When she whispered, embarrassed, I don't know if I can afford all the medication," he simply nodded, as if he'd expected it. "I'll write down the essentials first. There's a program that covers part of the cost. I'll help you apply." No hesitation, no condescension, just help. That night, as she rocked Nathaniel to sleep, Alina replayed the encounter in her mind. She told herself it was nothing, just a doctor doing his job. But some small corner of her heart, starved for kindness, warmed at the memory of his steady eyes. Weeks passed, and their paths crossed again. Another fever, another rash, another late-night panic that drove her to the clinic. Each time, Nathan was there. Sometimes he slipped her samples from the pharmacy to save her money. Sometimes he walked her to the bus stop after long waits, carrying the diaper bag slung easily over one shoulder. One evening, after a particularly rough appointment, Alina muttered, "You don't have to do this. I know I must look pathetic." Nathan stopped in his tracks. "Pathetic? Alina, you're raising 2 babies on your own. You're working, studying, surviving. That's not pathetic, that's heroic. The words caught her off guard. Heroic. No one had ever called her that before. She swallowed hard, blinking back tears. It wasn't romance, not then. It was something quieter, steadier. A presence she hadn't realized she needed until it was there. Nathan became a fixture in their lives in small, unassuming ways. He showed her how to treat diaper rash without expensive creams, how to check fevers with a touch more accurately than cheap thermometers. Once, when her stove broke, he appeared with a toolbox and fixed it, laughing at his own clumsy handiwork. The twins adored him. Noah giggled whenever Nathan made faces, and Nathaniel reached for his stethoscope with eager little hands. Watching them, Elena's chest ached with a strange mix of gratitude and fear. Gratitude for the help, fear of needing it too much. Because deep down, she still carried scars. Adrian's betrayal, Selena's laughter, the humiliation that had burned her alive, it all whispered in the back of her mind, don't trust, don't hope, don't let anyone close enough to break you again. Yet on the nights when the weight of exhaustion threatened to crush her, Nathan's steady presence lit a small flame in the dark. Elena never intended to let Nathan slip into her daily life. She had sworn after Adrian that she would depend on no one, that her strength had to be hers alone. But life, with its stubborn unpredictability, had other plans. It started small. One rainy afternoon, Elena returned from the grocery store with both boys bundled in the stroller, bags dangling from her arms. The elevator in her building was out of order again, and she faced the long climb to the 3rd floor. She gritted her teeth, preparing to wrestle the stroller up step by step. Then a voice called from behind, "Need a hand?" Nathan stood there in a gray hoodie, his hair plastered to his forehead from the downpour. He must have been coming off shift at the hospital nearby. Before she could protest, he grabbed the stroller with an easy grin. "Don't argue. Just let me." Together, they maneuvered the stroller up the narrow stairwell. By the time they reached her apartment door, Elena's shoulders ached less than usual, though her pride bristled. She fumbled for her keys, muttering, "You really don't have to, I know," Nathan said simply. "But I want to." He didn't stay, didn't press, just tipped her a 2-finger salute and disappeared down the hall. But the memory lingered, unsettling in its gentleness. Weeks later, the landlord came knocking, his face pinched with impatience. "Rent's late again," he snapped. Elena tried to explain, offering part of the payment, promising the rest soon. The man scoffed. "I should evict you. You're more trouble than you're worth." The confrontation ended with Elena trembling on the floor, clutching Noah as he cried from the commotion. Minutes later, there was another knock. Nathan stood at the door, holding a grocery bag. He'd heard the shouting on his way upstairs. "What happened?" His voice was sharp, protective. Elena shook her head. "Nothing I can't handle." But he saw the redness in her eyes, the way her hands shook. Without a word, he set the bag on the table and began unloading food, bread, milk, fresh fruit. She protested weakly, but he only said, "Call it in advance on all the free smiles these to give me." Noah gurgled in response, and Nathan chuckled, his warmth filling the tiny kitchen. That night, after the boys were asleep, Elena stared at the groceries. Pride screamed at her to refuse, but gratitude softened the edges of her resistance. Maybe accepting help didn't make her weak. Maybe it simply made her human. Over time, Nathan's presence grew more natural. He visited on his days off, always bringing something smaller box of diapers, a storybook, a second-hand toy. Sometimes he stayed to fix a leaky faucet or patch a hole in the wall. His clumsy efforts accompanied by self-deprecating jokes that made Elena laugh despite herself. He never crossed boundaries. When he held the babies, it was with reverence, as though they were treasures entrusted to him. When he spoke to Elena, it was with respect, never prying into wounds she wasn't ready to expose. Yet slowly, walls she had built around her heart began to shift. One evening, Exhaustion pinned her to the couch. The twins had been restless all day, and her body felt heavy as stone. Nathan arrived with takeout containers, filling the air with the scent of fried rice and sesame chicken. "You need a break," he said, setting the food down. "Eat. I'll handle them for a while." Before she could object, he scooped Nathaniel into his arms, swaying gently until the baby's cries softened. Noah giggled at his silly faces, and soon the room echoed with laughter instead of wails. Alina sat frozen, chopsticks poised, watching the scene unfold, for the first time in what felt like forever. She ate a full meal without rushing, without balancing a baby on her hip. Her throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes. She turned away so Nathan wouldn't see, but he caught her anyway. "You don't have to do everything alone, Alina," he said quietly. "You've been strong for so long. Let someone else carry part of the weight." Her lips parted, but no words came. The idea of sharing her burden terrified her. Yet, as she watched him cradle her son with such care, a fragile hope stirred, dangerous, but undeniable. Still, at night, when the apartment was quiet again, she lay awake, battling her own heart. She remembered Adrian's betrayal too clearly, the sting of laughter, the shame that had nearly destroyed her. Could she risk opening herself again? Could she risk letting someone in, only to be shattered once more? But then she would hear Noah's soft breathing, Nathaniel's tiny sighs, and she knew she couldn't afford to collapse. Maybe, just maybe, Nathan's steady presence wasn't a threat. Maybe it was the lifeline she hadn't dared to hope for. By the twins' first birthday, the apartment no longer felt like a cage of survival. It was still small, still shabby, but Alina had filled it with touches of love, a mural of painted stars above the crib, second-hand books stacked on the shelves, photographs of Noah and Nathaniel taped proudly to the wall. The boys were toddling now, unsteady steps carrying them from one end of the room to the other, their giggles echoing like bells. Nathan was there that day, of course. He showed up with a lopsided cake he claimed to have baked himself, though Alina suspected the grocery store had done the real work. "Don't ask too many questions," he said with a grin as she raised an eyebrow. "Just pretend I slaved over it." The candles were small, the frosting uneven, but when the twins smashed their tiny fists into the cake, squealing with delight, Alina laughed harder than she had in years. It wasn't the party she'd once imagined for her children. No balloons, no grand hall, no glittering guests, but it was real. It was theirs, later, after the boys had collapsed into sugar-fueled naps. Alina and Nathan sat at the kitchen table, with mugs of lukewarm coffee. The silence between them was comfortable, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. "You're doing incredible," Nathan said suddenly, his gaze steady. "Look at them. Happy, healthy. That's because of you." Alina shook her head. "Because of us. You've been here more than anyone else." His lips curved, but his eyes softened. "I'm just a guest in your story, Alina. You're the one writing it." The words sank into her, warm and unsettling. She had been so used to being defined by others, Adrian's cast-off, Selena's betrayal, society's ridicule, but here was someone who saw her not as a victim, but as the author of her own fate. That night, when she lay in bed between her sleeping sons, Alina whispered to herself, "I am writing it, and it's not over yet." Over the next years, the pattern held. Nathan was constant, never demanding, never pressing. He celebrated small victories with Hertha. First time she earned enough from freelance legal work to pay rent without panic. The day she bought the boys matching coats with her own money. When exhaustion threatened to break her, he reminded her of how far she had come, and Alina changed. Slowly, steadily, she rebuilt herself. She studied late into the night, poring over textbooks, sharpening the mind she once thought dulled by struggle. She began taking on small cases pro bono at first, helping neighbors with housing disputes, drafting letters for those who couldn't afford lawyers. Word spread, and soon clients knocked at her door, drawn by her tenacity, her refusal to back down. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, lost cases, cruel remarks from established attorneys who sneered at her lack of credentials. But every failure only deepened her resolve. She was no longer the girl, humiliated in a ballroom. She was a woman fighting tooth and nail for a future her sons deserved. Nathan watched all of it, his pride evident in every glance. Sometimes she caught him looking at her the way a man looks at something fragile, yet fiercely beautiful, and her heart stumbled. Fear still lingered. Fear of opening, of trusting, but, alongside it, grew something else, gratitude, and maybe, just maybe, the first whispers of hope. One winter evening, snowflakes whirled outside the window as Alina sat grading papers for a client. Nathan had come over after his shift, still in scrubs, hair tied. The twins, now 4, sprawled on the floor with blocks, building towers that wobbled precariously. Nathaniel looked up and declared, "Uncle Nathan, help." His tower collapsed, scattering blocks across the rug. Nathan laughed, crouching down. "All right, little man, let's make it stronger this time. Bigger base, see?" Together, they rebuilt, Noah clapping in delight when the tower held. Alina paused her work, watching the scene. A warmth spread through her chest, fierce and aching. This was family, she realized. Not the glittering kind plastered on magazine covers, but the real kind, messy, imperfect, born of loyalty and love. Later, after the boys were tucked into bed, Nathan lingered by the door. His hand hovered near the knob, then dropped. "Alina," he said quietly, "you don't have to answer now, or ever. But I need you to know, I care about you, about them. More than I can say." Her throat tightened. Memories of Adrian surged, his betrayal, his cruelty. Fear whispered, "Don't trust. Don't risk it." But another voice, gentler, rose. "People are not all the same. Not everyone leaves." She swallowed hard, meeting Nathan's gaze. "I don't know if I can." "You don't have to," he said quickly. "Not until you're ready. Or maybe never. I'll still be here." Something inside her cracked, not in pain, but in release. For the first time since her world had collapsed, Alina allowed herself to believe that maybe she wasn't alone. As the years turned, Alina's strength grew. She became known in her community as the lawyer who never quit, who fought fiercely for those with nothing. Clients respected her. Colleagues began to take notice. She was building a reputation, a future, through it all. Nathan stood beside her not as a savior, but as a partner in the shadows. He didn't erase her struggles, but he lightened them. He didn't define her worth, but he reminded her of it when she forgot. And every night, when she kissed her sons goodnight, Alina knew the ashes of her past had not destroyed her. They had forged her. She was no longer the girl abandoned at the altar. She was a mother, a fighter, a woman who had risen, scarred but unbroken. And her story was only just beginning. The city skyline came into view as the train curved along the river, towers piercing the clouds like sharpened steel. Alina sat by the window, her reflection superimposed against the glittering horizon. Her hair, once worn loose and naive, was now swept into a neat bun. A tailored navy suit hugged her figure. Her eyes, framed by subtle makeup, no longer shimmered with youthful illusions. They gleamed with hard-won resolve. Beside her, Noah and Nathaniel leaned against each other, dozing after the long ride. At 7 years old, they were mirrors of each other, their features carved with unmistakable resemblance to the man she once loved and hated in equal measure. Alina reached out, smoothing Nathaniel's hair with gentle fingers. They were her anchor, her reason, the proof that she had survived. The train screeched to a halt at Grand Central. Crowds surged, voices echoing against the vaulted ceiling. Alina guided her boys through the throng, her briefcase in one hand, the other clutching theirs. It had been years since she last set foot in this city, years since she fled in disgrace. Now, she returned, not as the abandoned bride the tabloids had mocked, but as a lawyer with her own firm, invited to represent a client in a high-profile corporate lawsuit. Irony tasted sharp on her tongue. The opposing party was none other than Cole Industries. Adrian's empire. In the cab to their modest hotel, Alina stared out at the familiar streets. Billboards flashed with advertisements, some bearing Adrian's face in glossy business magazines. She felt no tremor of longing, only the chill of memory, his cold voice declaring she was unworthy. The crimson stain on her wedding gown. Noah nudged her shoulder. "Mom, are you nervous?" She glanced at him, at the innocence in his wide eyes. "A little," she admitted. "But I've been nervous before, and I made it through, didn't I?" Nathaniel chimed in, grinning. "You always make it through." Their faith bolstered her more than any pep talk. She smiled, pressing kisses to their heads. "That's because of you, too." The courthouse loomed gray and imposing, its marble pillars etched against the morning sky. Alina climbed the steps in heels that clicked sharply, each sound a declaration. Inside, journalists clustered, cameras flashing as lawyers filed in. She ignored them, head high, her sons escorted to a waiting room by a trusted paralegal. The courtroom buzzed with tension. At the opposing table, Adrian Cole sat flanked by a team of high-priced attorneys. Time had sharpened him further, his hair darker, his suit impeccable, his presence commanding. But Alina noticed the lines etched deeper around his mouth, the shadows beneath his eyes. He radiated power still, yet it was a colder, more brittle power. Their eyes met across the room. For a heartbeat, the years dissolved. She saw him as he had once been, laughing under summer stars, whispering promises in her ear. But then the memory shifted, and she saw the ballroom, the betrayal, the laughter of guests. Alina didn't flinch. She held his gaze until he looked away first. The judge entered, and proceedings began. The case was fierce, contracts contested, corporate negligence alleged. Alina spoke with precision, her voice carrying across the chamber like a blade honed sharp. She dismantled arguments piece by piece, her calm composure belying the fire inside. At one point, as she laid out evidence with flawless clarity, she felt Adrian's stare. She didn't look at him, but she knew. He was realizing who she had become. No longer the girl who had begged for his love, but a woman who commanded respect on her own terms. When the session adjourned for lunch, Alina gathered her notes. A murmur rippled through the crowd as Adrian rose, striding toward her. Her chest tightened, but she steadied her breath. "Alina," he said, his voice lower than she remembered. She turned, calm, professional. "Mr. Cole." His jaw tightened at the formality. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough," she replied evenly, slipping her papers into her case. The words hung between them, sharp as glass. For the first time in years, Adrian Cole, who once believed himself untouchable, felt something rare, the sting of regret. The corridor outside the courtroom buzzed with chatter, reporters circling like hawks. Alina walked briskly, her heels striking marble, a paralegal at her side. She had no interest in small talk or recycled questions about the upstart attorney taking on the mighty Cole Industries. She wanted only to breathe, to clear her head before the afternoon session. But she hadn't made it 3 steps before Adrian intercepted her. "Alina." Her name on his lips froze her mid. She straightened, spine rigid. His presence was the same as ever, commanding, magnetic, but the years had carved something harsher into him. His eyes, once filled with careless arrogance, now carried an edge of wariness, as though the weight of empires had begun to press against his bones. She refused to be impressed. "Mr. Cole," she answered, cool and professional. A muscle ticked in his jaw. "Must we play this game?" Her lips curved, not quite a smile. "I don't play games anymore." They stood locked in silence. 2 adversaries flanked by buzzing voices and flashing cameras. Then a tug at Alina's sleeve drew her attention. "Mom." Noah's voice, soft but insistent. He and Nathaniel had been released early from the waiting room by her paralegal, who now looked apologetic. They were restless, the young woman explained quickly. Elena's chest tightened. She hadn't wanted the boys anywhere near Adrian, not yet. But it was too late. Two identical faces peeked out from behind her legs, wide-eyed at the sea of strangers. Adrian's gaze followed, and the world seemed to stop. The twins blinked up at him, hazel eyes, framed by long lashes, eyes that mirrored his own. For a moment, Adrian forgot how to breathe. His polished composure cracked, something raw flickering across his face. He stared as though the children were ghosts conjured to haunt him. Elena shifted subtly, positioning herself between them. "Boys," she said firmly. Her tone meant as much for Adrian as for them. "Go with Ms. Harper, please. I'll be along soon." Nathaniel hesitated, clinging to her hand, but Noah tugged him away. They vanished down the corridor, chattering softly to each other. When they were gone, Adrian spoke, voice low and jagged. "Elena, those children are none of your concern." Her words cut like steel. His brows drew together. Elena, they have nothing of yours." Her tone snapped like a whip, silencing him. She gathered her briefcase, her knuckles pale around the handle. "Do not presume to know anything about my life." For years, Adrian Cole had been obeyed, feared, revered. In boardrooms, his voice silenced men twice his age. In society, his wealth commanded deference. But here, before the woman he had once discarded, he found himself utterly powerless. "Elena," he tried again, softer now. "Please, at least tell me." "Tell you what?" She spun, fury flashing. "That while you were playing Empire with Selena draped over your arm, I was alone. That I bled and starved and fought for every scrap to keep those children alive. You don't get to ask me anything, Adrian." The name, stripped of affection, struck him harder than a blow. For a heartbeat, the confident CEO faltered, shoulders sagging. Reporters had drawn closer, sensing drama. Flashes lit the hall. Elena inhaled sharply, gathering her composure. She would not let the world see her cracked. She was not the broken bride anymore. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Adrian rooted in place, haunted by the echo of small voices calling her mom. The rest of the day blurred into testimony and objections, the sharp rhythm of legal warfare. Elena's focus never wavered, though she felt Adrian stare on her constantly, each time she spoke, presenting evidence with crystalline clarity. She saw him shift uncomfortably, as though every word was a reminder of what he had lost, what he could never undo. During recess, she caught him watching her, not like an opponent, but like a man seeing something he had never truly known. The girl he had mocked at the altar was gone. Before him stood a woman carved from fire and endurance, a mother whose very presence radiated strength. That evening, back at the hotel, Elena tucked her boys into bed. Nathaniel snuggled his stuffed bear close. "Noah, ever the curious one," whispered Mom. "Who was that man?" Her heart stuttered. She had rehearsed this moment for years, knowing one day the questions would come. She smoothed his hair, choosing her words with care. "He's someone from a long time ago," she said softly. "Someone who doesn't matter now. But he looked at us funny," Noah pressed, "like he knew us." Elena's throat tightened. She kissed his forehead. "People look at you because you're extraordinary. That's all." Satisfied, Noah closed his eyes. Within minutes, both boys were asleep, their breathing steady. Elena sat in the dim light, staring at their faces. Adrian's features were etched in them, undeniably his jawline, his eyes, even the curve of their smiles. No amount of denial could erase it. She pressed her palms together, whispering into the silence, "They're mine, not yours. Mine." Yet deep down, beneath the anger, a darker truth gnawed. No matter how she tried to bury it, Adrian Cole would always live in them. The courtroom the following morning throbbed with anticipation. Word of yesterday's hallway encounter had already spread. Reporters whispered about the mystery children. Gossip blogs speculated on Elena's past. She ignored them all, her focus razor-sharp, as she arranged her files. The only sound she allowed herself to hear was the steady tap of her pen, the anchor that steadied her pulse. Adrian entered moments later, his presence pulling the air taut. Dressed in an obsidian suit, he looked every inch the titan of industry, but his eyes, those betrayed him. They sought her, lingered, burned with questions unasked and answers feared. Proceedings began, and the battle resumed. Witnesses testified, lawyers sparred. Elena commanded the room with calm authority, her cross-examinations slicing through carefully rehearsed defenses. Each objection she raised was measured, precise, a testament to years of clawing her way back from nothing. Adrian should have been focused on strategy, but he found himself distracted. Every word Elena spoke resonated with conviction, a strength he had never recognized in her before. The girl he had once dismissed as fragile now stood unshakable, forcing seasoned attorneys into a stance. At recess, his lead counsel muttered, "She's dangerous. We underestimated her." Adrian didn't respond. His gaze never left her. Later that afternoon, as Elena presented a damning piece of evidence, their eyes locked again. Something flickered between them, not the warmth of the past, but a collision of histories too heavy to ignore. She did not waver, though her chest burned with the weight of his stare. When the judge called adjournment for the day, Elena gathered her papers, intent on slipping away before Adrian could corner her again. But he was faster. "Elena." His voice was low, urgent. She turned sharply. "Mr. Cole, I have no interest in small talk. This isn't small talk." His expression was stripped of arrogance now, replaced by something raw. "Those children they mine?" The question, spoken aloud, punched the air from her lungs. Around them, the courthouse emptied, footsteps echoing. She drew herself tall, every inch the lawyer, the survivor. "They are mine," she said coldly. "That is all you need to know." His jaw clenched. "Elena, please, please." Her laugh was brittle. "Do you know what that word sounds like from you? You, who left me humiliated in front of the world. You, who never once asked if I survived. And now, after 7 years, you want answers?" Adrian flinched, the memory slicing sharper than any blade. He remembered Selena's mocking smile, his own blind arrogance, the cruel words he'd spat to sever ties. At the time, he'd convinced himself he was right, that Elena had been too small for his world, too plain, too unworthy. But standing here now, confronted with the woman she had become, regret hollowed him. "I was a fool," he admitted hoarsely. "I let pride blind me." "I don't," she cut him off, her voice shaking not from weakness but fury. "You don't get to rewrite the past. You don't get absolution." For a moment, silence reigned. Only the faint buzz of fluorescent lights filled the space. Adrian's hand twitched at his side, as though reaching for her, but he stopped himself. "I only want the truth," he whispered. Elena's eyes glistened, though no tears fell. "The truth is, you lost the right to know a long time ago." She turned on her heel, her footsteps sharp against marble, leaving him once again in her wake. That evening, in the quiet of her hotel room, Elena sat by the window while the twins slept. The city lights glittered beyond the glass, each one a reminder of how far she had come. Yet inside, turmoil churned. Adrian's face haunted her not, the cruel groom of her past, but the man she had seen today, stripped of certainty, desperate for answers. She hated him for it, hated herself for feeling the tremor in her chest when his voice softened. She pressed her hands together, whispering fiercely into the dark, "I will not break again. I can't." But when she closed her eyes, she saw Noah and Nathaniel's eyes hiss, eyes, and wondered how long she could keep the walls intact. Adrian, meanwhile, returned to his penthouse, The city sprawled below in glittering arrogance. He poured himself a drink, staring at his reflection in the glass. For years, he had conquered everything. He touched markets, rivals, fortunes, yet the sight of two children, mirrors of himself, had undone him. Mine, he whispered into the empty room, though the word felt fragile, unearned. He thought of Alina, of the fire in her voice, of the woman she had become despite him. Shame cut deeper than whiskey. For the first time, Adrian Cole, Billionaire CEO, felt the gnawing fear that some mistakes could never be repaired. The next morning, the courthouse lobby was chaos. Reporters hounded her every step, cameras flashing like gunfire. Alina kept her head high, shielding Noah and Nathaniel as they clung to her sides. Their paralegal ushered them through the crowd, but Adrian was already there, waiting at the base of the marble staircase. "Alina," he called, his voice cutting through the din. She stiffened. The twins looked up, curious. "Keep walking," she told them firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. But Adrian was not a man accustomed to being ignored. He strode forward, his long legs devouring the distance. "Alina, please. Just a moment." She spun on her heel, eyes blazing. "You don't speak to me in public. You don't speak to me at all." A hush rippled through the lobby as onlookers watched the clash unfold. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he lowered his voice. "You can hate me all you want. I deserve it. But those boys," his eyes flicked toward the twins. "They deserve the truth." Her pulse thundered. "The truth is, they are mine. Mine to raise, mine to protect. You forfeited every right the day you humiliated me before the world." Adrian's throat worked, but he said nothing more. Security intervened, dispersing the crowd, and Alina swept her children upstairs. Yet, his words followed her into the courtroom, echoing louder than the judge's gavel. That evening, after the boys were asleep, Alina met Nathan at a cafe across from the hotel. He had driven in from his own hospital shift, exhaustion etched into the corners of his smile. Yet when she walked in, he stood, pulling out a chair as though she were royalty. "You look like hell," he said gently, teasing to mask concern. She huffed a laugh, sinking into the seat. "That obvious? You've been carrying the world again," Nathan said. "How bad was it today?" She hesitated, then exhaled. He saw them, both of them. Nathan's hand stilled on his coffee cup. "Adrian." She nodded. He asked if they were his. Silence stretched. Nathan's expression was unreadable, but his fingers curled into fists. "And what did you say?" "That they're mine," she whispered. For a long moment, Nathan said nothing. Then he leaned forward, his voice low. "You're right. They are yours. You've raised them. You've fought for them. You've bled for them. Don't let him take that from you." Elena's throat tightened, but they looked just like him. "Nathan, the world will see it eventually. Then let the world talk. You owe no one an explanation." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But the memory of Adrian's eyes, the shock, the hunger, the regret burned into her. She stirred her coffee aimlessly, fighting the tremor in her hands. Nathan reached across the table, covering her fingers with his. His warmth steadied her pulse. "You're not alone anymore, Elena. You haven't been for a long time." Her eyes lifted to his. And for a moment the noise of the cafe faded, leaving only his steady presence. But even then, Adrian's shadow loomed, a ghost that refused to release her. The next day, Adrian took a risk he hadn't in years. He arrived not at the courthouse, but at the modest hotel where Alina was staying. His security detail argued, but he waved them off. This was something no army of lawyers or assistants could fix. He knocked. The door opened to reveal Noah, his hair tousled from play, a toy car clutched in his fist. The boy blinked up at him, curious. "Hi." Adrian's chest constricted. He crouched instinctively, lowering himself to the child's height. "Hi," he said softly. You must be Noah. The boy nodded solemnly, then shouted over his shoulder, Mom, there's a man here. Footsteps thundered. Alina appeared, eyes flashing like a drawn blade. She snatched Noah back, pulling him behind her. You have no right to be here. Alina, please, Adrian said, his voice rough. I just want to talk. You've done enough talking in my life. She tried to shut the door, but his hand braced against the frame, not forceful, but desperate. 5 minutes, he pleaded. That's all I ask. 5 minutes to explain. Her jaw clenched. For a moment, she considered slamming the door anyway. But then Nathaniel's curious face appeared beside his brother's, both boys staring with wide eyes. She couldn't let them see her fight a battle in the hallway like prey cornered by a predator. Fine, she hissed. 5 minutes. Downstairs. Not here. They sat in the dim hotel lounge, a few scattered guests ignoring them. Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his knees, searching for words. For once, the master of boardrooms and negotiations was at a loss. I don't expect forgiveness, he began. What I did to you was unforgivable. I thought I was protecting myself, my image, my empire. I was a coward, Alina. I see that now. She stared at him, arms crossed, expression carved from stone. He swallowed. But when I saw those boys, his voice cracked, the first fracture in his armor. God, Alina, they look like me. And I realized, 7 years. 7 years I've missed. 7 years you carried that alone. I can't erase it. But I want to try to make it right. Her laugh was sharp, bitter. Make it right. With what money? Custody battles. Do you think you can buy back the nights I went hungry so they wouldn't? Or the winters I wrapped myself around them to keep them warm because the heat was out? He flinched, shame etching lines into his face. I don't want to buy anything. I want to be there. For them. For you. If you'll let me. For me. Her voice was a whip crack. You think after what you did, I could ever let you near me again? Adrian bowed his head. For the first time, the Titans seemed small. Then let me near them. Let me at least try to be a father. Alina rose, her chair scraping. 5 minutes are up. She left him there, alone in the dim lounge, drowning in the weight of years he could never reclaim. The following week blurred with court sessions, late-night paperwork, and whispered questions Alina had no intention of answering. Yet through it all, Adrian lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. He appeared at recess, at the steps of the courthouse, sometimes even at the cafe across the street, where she grabbed quick lunches with her paralegal. He never forced conversation, but his eyes always sought hers, a silent plea she refused to acknowledge. But the boys noticed. One morning, as she braided Nathaniel's hair before school, Noah asked, Mom, why does that man keep looking at us? Her fingers stilled. What man? She asked, though she knew exactly. The one in the suit. The one with eyes like ours. Nathaniel said matter-of-factly. Her heart lurched. She forced a smile, tucking the braid neatly. He's no one important. Don't worry about him. But children were sharper than adults often gave them credit for. The twins exchanged a glance, silent but knowing. That evening, she returned to the hotel to find Nathan waiting in the lobby, still in his hospital scrubs, exhaustion pulling at his shoulders. He straightened when he saw her, concern flickering across his face. You didn't answer my texts. I was worried. I've been busy, she said, her voice taut. With him. Nathan's tone was quiet, not accusatory but heavy with unspoken fear. Her throat tightened. I don't want it to be with him, but he's everywhere. He saw them again today. Nathan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. And how did they react? They asked questions, she admitted. I lied. Nathan's eyes softened. You're protecting them. That's not a lie. That's love. She blinked rapidly, pushing down the burn in her chest. But how long can I keep this wall up, Nathan? They're smart. They'll put it together. Then tell them when you're ready, he said gently. Not when he forces you to. Not when the world demands it. When you decide. His steadiness steadied her. She reached out, brushing his arm in silent gratitude. What would I do without you? He gave a crooked smile. Hopefully you'll never have to find out. Days later, Adrian tried again, not with her, but with the boys. The courthouse steps were swarming with reporters when Alina emerged. Her son's hands gripped tightly in hers. She spotted Adrian instantly, standing apart from the chaos. His gaze locked on them. Before she could divert, Noah tugged free, darting toward the marble fountain. Mom, look, he called, chasing a pigeon. Nathaniel followed, laughter ringing, and Adrian was there, faster than anyone else, steadying Nathaniel as he tripped over the curb. Careful, little man, he said, his voice softer than Alina remembered it ever being. Nathaniel blinked up at him. For a moment, recognition sparked not of memory, but of blood. Thanks, he mumbled. Elena's heart thundered as she rushed forward, pulling her children back. Don't touch them, she snapped, fury lacing every word. Adrian raised his hands, palms open. He almost fell. That's all. They don't need your heroics, she hissed. They don't need you. The twins glanced between them, confusion knitting their brows. Noah tugged at her sleeve. Mom, why are you mad? He was nice. Her throat closed. She forced a smile down at them. Because some people don't belong in our lives. Come on. She ushered them into the waiting car, refusing to look back. But through the tinted glass, she saw Adrian still standing there, shoulders squared against the flashing cameras, eyes heavy with something dangerously close to grief. That night, sleep evaded her. The boys were sprawled across the bed, their small faces peaceful. But Alina sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. Adrian's voice haunted her. They deserved the truth. She hated him for planting the seed, hated herself for wondering if, on some level, he was right. A soft knock interrupted her spiral. She opened the door to find Nathan holding 2 cups of tea. You looked like you weren't sleeping, he said simply. She let him in, grateful for the distraction. They sat in silence, steam curling between them. Finally, she whispered, what if I'm wrong, Nathan? What if keeping them from him isn't protecting them, but stealing from them? He didn't answer right away. He studied her, his gaze steady. You've never stolen anything from them. You've given them everything. Love, safety, sacrifice. Don't let him twist that. Her eyes stung. She pressed a hand to her face. I'm so tired. Tired of fighting him in the courtroom. Tired of fighting his ghost in my head. And now, she gestured helplessly. Now, he's everywhere. Nathan set his cup down, leaning closer. Then let me carry some of it. You don't have to do this alone anymore, Alina. Not against him. Not against the world. His hand brushed hers, tentative but grounding. For a moment, the storm inside her calmed. But later, when he was gone, she lay awake, listening to her son's soft breathing, and admitted a truth she couldn't tell anyone. No matter how much she loathed Adrian, no matter how fiercely she loved Nathan, a part of her still trembled when she looked into those hazel eyes mirrored in her children. By the end of the second trial week, Alina was frayed at the edges. The case itself was grueling, but the harder battle raged outside the courtroom, whispers in the press. Relentless speculation, Adrian's unyielding gaze. The twins, sharp-eyed as ever, felt the tension. Noah grew quieter, Nathaniel more restless. One Saturday morning, Alina decided to take them to the park. They deserved fresh air, a day free from flashing cameras and legal jargon. The boys raced ahead, their laughter chasing pigeons into the sky. For the first time in weeks, Elena's chest loosened until she saw him. Adrian stood across the path, hands buried in the pockets of his coat. Not the polished CEO flanked by bodyguards, just a man, watching. His eyes softened as the boys tumbled across the grass, their hair glinting in the sun. Alina froze, fury igniting. She marched toward him. "Are you following us now?" He met her fire calmly. "I didn't know you'd be here. I just needed air. Same as you. Coincidence?" She spat. "Do you expect me to believe that?" "Believe what you want," he said quietly. "But look at them, Alina. Just look." Against her will, her gaze flicked back to Noah and Nathaniel. They were building forts out of sticks, their laughter echoing. Adrian's voice broke through her defenses. "They're perfect. And I wasn't there to see any of it." His tone cracked raw. "Not their first words, their first steps, not the nights you must have stayed awake with them. I missed it all." Her chest ached, but she steeled herself. "You chose to miss it." His eyes met hers, haunted. "No, I chose wrong. I chose pride, and I've been paying for it every day since." Her breath hitched. For a split second, she saw not the arrogant groom of her past, but a man stripped bare, desperate, human. It rattled her more than anger ever could. Before she could respond, Nathaniel ran up, his cheeks flushed. "Mom, can we stay longer? Please." Alina brushed his hair back tenderly. "A little longer." Adrian crouched instinctively. "I level with the boy." "That's a strong fort you're building," he said. Nathaniel studied him, curious. "Do you build forts too?" A ghost of a smile crossed Adrian's face. "Not as good as yours." Elena's heart clenched. She pulled her son gently away. "Nathaniel, go play with your brother." The boy obeyed, though he glanced back at Adrian with puzzled interest. When they were out of earshot, Alina turned on him, voice sharp with panic. "Don't you dare blur the lines. They don't know you. They don't need to. But they do," Adrian insisted, rising to his full height. "They deserve to know who I am." "You mean what you are," she hissed. "The man who left their mother bleeding humiliation on a ballroom floor. The man who never once came looking." His face paled. He reached for words, then stopped. "Alina, I can't undo it. But I can be better now. For them. For you. For me." Her laugh was jagged. "You think flowers of regret can grow on the grave you dug." For a long, tense moment, they stared at each other, old wounds bleeding into new ones. Then a voice cut through. "Alina." Nathan stood at the edge of the path, holding coffee cups. He had planned to surprise them, but his eyes took in the scene instantly. Adrian, standing too close. Elena's shoulders taut, the boys oblivious nearby. Nathan's jaw set. He strode over, placing himself subtly at Elena's side. "Is this man bothering you?" Relief swept through her like a tide. "No more than usual," she murmured. Adrian's gaze flicked between them, understanding dawning. "Ah," he said softly, bitterness curling his lips. "The good doctor. You've had help." Nathan didn't flinch. Someone had to step up. The unspoken accusation landed heavy, and it wasn't you. Adrian's fists clenched, but he said nothing. He looked at Alina one last time, his eyes blazing with something between longing and torment. Then he turned and walked away, his figure swallowed by the crowd. That night, Alina tucked her boys into bed, but her hands trembled. Nathan lingered in the kitchen, washing mugs that didn't need washing. Finally, he said, "You don't owe him anything, not even your thoughts." She leaned against the doorway, exhaustion etched into her face. "But I can't stop. Every time I look at them, I see him." Nathan dried his hands, crossing the room. "Then see yourself too. See the woman who raised them, who gave them everything he didn't." Her eyes glistened. "You make it sound easy." "It's not easy," Nathan admitted, "but it's the truth." She closed her eyes, leaning briefly against his chest, letting his steady heartbeat drown out the chaos. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a life without Adrian's shadow. A life built on the quiet constancy Nathan offered. But later, alone in the dark, her mind betrayed her. She replayed Adrian's words, his raw voice in the park. I missed it all. And though she hated him, though she loved Nathan's steadiness, something in her heart trembled with the possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, Adrian wasn't entirely lost. She hated herself for it, but the fracture was there, undeniable. The trial entered its final stretch. Weeks of arguments and counter-arguments had boiled down to this: closing statements. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she arranged her papers at the plaintiff's table, though no one watching would have noticed. Her voice, honed by years of practice and pain, would soon decide the fate of her client and, perhaps, in some unspoken way, her own. Adrian sat across the room, his profile carved in stone. To the public, he remained the unflinching CEO, exuding control. But Elena had seen the cracks, the haunted glances, the way his shoulders sagged when he thought no one watched. When her turn came, Elena rose. The courtroom hushed. She spoke of contracts and breaches, of accountability and justice. But woven into her words was something deeper, a defiance that transcended law. Every sentence carried the weight of her journey, of nights spent cradling hungry infants, of years clawing back dignity from the ashes of betrayal. Her closing words rang like a bell. No empire, no fortune, no name is above responsibility. My client deserves justice, and so does every person who has been told they are powerless against the powerful. The jury listened, spellbound. When she sat down, silence lingered, then rippled with murmurs of awe. Adrian's attorneys delivered their rebuttal, polished and cold, but Adrian himself remained distracted. His gaze fixed on Elena was something between pride and torment. The judge dismissed the court for deliberation. Tension crackled as people filed out. Elena gathered her notes quickly, eager to escape before Adrian could corner her again. But he caught her outside the courthouse, away from the press this time. His voice was low, urgent. Elena, wait. She turned sharply, exhaustion fraying her patience. What more could you possibly want? I wanted to tell you. He hesitated, his throat working. You were extraordinary in there, not just as an attorney. As his voice broke, as you, the woman I should never have let go. Her chest tightened, rage and longing colliding. Don't do this, Adrian. Don't rewrite history because you suddenly regret it. I'm not rewriting anything, he said fiercely. I'm admitting the truth for the first time. I was blind, Elena, blind and arrogant. I thought money and power meant everything, and I threw away the only thing that ever really mattered. She shook her head, tears burning but unshed. Words are easy now. Where were they when I needed them? He stepped closer, his voice dropping. I can't change the past, but I can change now. Let me prove it, not to you, if you'll never allow it, but to them. Let me be a father. The plea pierced her, but she turned away. It's not that simple. It is, he countered. They're my sons. Her breath caught. She had never heard him say it aloud, never acknowledged it herself beyond whispered truths in the dark. They're mine, she whispered. Mine to protect. He exhaled, defeated, but his eyes burned with resolve. Then let me protect them too. Before she could reply, Noah's voice rang out from across the steps. Mom. He and Nathaniel waved, their faces bright. Adrian's gaze followed, softening, breaking. Elena's heart twisted. She had spent years building walls, but cracks were forming, and she feared one day they might shatter entirely. That night, back at the hotel, she sat awake long after the boys slept. Nathan joined her, his presence quiet but steady. You saw him again, he said softly. She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. He asked to be their father. Nathan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. And what did you say? I didn't, she whispered. I couldn't. Silence stretched. Nathan set his hand over hers, warm, grounding. Whatever choice you make, Elena, I'll be here. Not because I expect anything back, but because I believe in you. Always. Her throat closed, gratitude and guilt tangling. She leaned against him, letting his steadiness hold her. Yet in the quiet, Adrian's voice still echoed, relentless. They're my sons. The jury had not yet reached a verdict, but outside the courtroom, Adrian Cole had already begun his own trial, the trial of proving he could be something more than the man who broke her. It started subtly. One afternoon, as Alina arrived with the boys, she discovered a stack of books delivered to the hotel lobby. Children's books, beautifully illustrated, signed with a neat card, for Noah and Nathaniel, a friend. She bristled instantly, knowing exactly who had sent them. I don't want his charity, she muttered, shoving the package aside. But when the boys saw the title stories of explorers, inventors, heroes, they lit up with delight. Please, Mom, can we keep them? Noah begged, clutching one to his chest. Elena's resolve faltered. She hated that Adrian knew how to reach them, but she couldn't deny the joy in their eyes. One book, she conceded reluctantly. The rest go back. That night, she found Nathan reading aloud to the twins, his voice patient, his expression warm. She lingered in the doorway, her heart caught between comfort and unease. Nathan belonged in this picture he always had, and yet, the book in his hand was Adrian's intrusion. A reminder that the past was clawing its way back. The next attempt came less subtly. During recess, Adrian approached her with a folder in hand. What now? She snapped, weary of his persistence. College funds, he said simply, for both boys. Irrevocable trusts. No strings attached. She froze. You think you can buy your way into their lives? His eyes flashed. This isn't about buying. It's about providing. They deserve opportunities, education, security. If you hate me too much to accept my presence, fine. But don't punish them. The words hit their mark, sharp and unyielding. She slammed the folder shut and shoved it back into his chest. You don't get to tell me what they deserve. I've given them everything they need without you. Everything but a father. Adrian said quietly. The retort sliced deeper than she expected. She stormed away, her heels striking marble like gunfire. That evening, she poured the entire story out to Nathan. He listened without interruption, his jaw tightening only slightly when she repeated Adrian's words. Finally, Nathan said, he's not wrong about one thing. They do deserve a father. But that doesn't mean it has to be him. Her chest constricted. What are you saying? Nathan's gaze softened. I've been here, Alina, since the beginning. I've loved them, cared for them. If you'll let me. I want to be that father. The room tilted. She stared at him, heart pounding. She had always known, in some quiet part of herself, that Nathan's devotion went beyond friendship. But hearing it now, spoken plainly, shattered her balance. Nathan. You don't have to answer, he said quickly. Not now. Not ever, if you're not ready. I just needed you to know. Her throat tightened. She reached for his hand, squeezing it in silent gratitude. Nathan was safe, solid, everything Adrian wasn't. And yet, when she lay awake that night, Adrian's voice echoed louder than Nathan's confession. Everything but a father. Days turned into a pattern of pursuit. Adrian appeared not as the untouchable CEO, but as a man stripped of armor. He attended every hearing, even when his attorneys didn't require him. He lingered near the hotel, careful never to intrude too close, as though proximity alone might prove his sincerity. One morning, Alina found the boys whispering excitedly. Mom, Nathaniel said, eyes wide. Did you know that man gave our school a new playground? Her stomach dropped. What man? The one from court, Noah supplied. Everyone said he donated it. There's slides and swings and everything. Her hands shook. Adrian wasn't just creeping into their lives, he was building a stage in them. That evening, she confronted him outside the courthouse. Stay away from them, she hissed. Do you hear me? Stay away. Adrian's gaze didn't waver. I can't. They're my sons. They are my sons, she snapped. Mine. I raised them. I kept them alive when you were nowhere. His voice dropped, hoarse. And I will regret that until my last breath. But don't deny them me now, Alina. Don't deny them the choice. Her anger faltered. The choice. The very thing she had fought for all these years, the right to choose her path, her survival. Could she deny her children theirs? She turned away, shaken to her core. That night, Nathan found her by the window again, staring at the city lights. You're thinking about him, he said softly. She didn't deny it. He's everywhere, Nathan. In their eyes, their laughter, their questions, and now, in their futures. Nathan stepped closer. Then let me remind you, you're not defined by him. Neither are they. They're yours first. They always will be. Her eyes glistened. But what if they want him? Then we'll deal with that when it comes, Nathan said. But don't let him take you back to the girl he broke. You're stronger now. You don't need him to define you. She leaned into him, her body trembling. His arms wrapped around her, steady and safe. But even there, encircled by his warmth, her heart beat to a rhythm she couldn't silence. Adrian's shadow was still part of her story. The jury returned after 2 long days. The courtroom was tense, heavy with anticipation. Alina sat with her client, papers neatly stacked, though her palms were damp. Adrian waited across the aisle, his face impassive, his empire hanging in the balance. The foreman rose. We find in favor of the plaintiff. A murmur rippled through the room. Alina exhaled, shoulders trembling. She had won, not just for her client, but for herself. Proof that she was no longer the girl destroyed on her wedding day. Applause filled the hall as reporters scrambled for quotes. Alina gathered her files, her focus already on her boys waiting in the anteroom. But Adrian's gaze pierced her, and she knew this battle was far from over. She found him outside, leaning against a pillar, alone. No attorneys, no entourage, just Adrian. You won, he said simply. Alina adjusted her briefcase. I did. You were brilliant, he admitted. Unstoppable. His voice cracked, sincerity bleeding through. I always knew you were strong. I just never let myself see it. Her throat tightened. Too little, too late. He stepped closer, careful, as though approaching a wounded animal. Alina, I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I love them. Even without knowing them, I've loved them since the moment I saw their faces. Her chest ached. You don't get to say that. You don't get to walk in after 7 years and claim love. I'm not claiming, he said fiercely. I'm begging. For a chance. Not for you if you can never look at me without hate, but for them, to be their father, to make up even a fraction of what I stole. Tears pricked her eyes, but she shook her head. You can't erase the nights, they cried, and I had nothing to give. You can't erase the hunger, the cold, the fear. No, Adrian whispered, but I can give them something now. A future, a father, someone who will never leave again. Silence stretched. For the first time in years, Elena's armor cracked. She saw not the cruel man at the altar, but the broken one before her. And that terrified her more than anything. Nathan appeared then, striding across the plaza. Relief surged through her at the sight of him, steady, dependable. He slipped his hand over hers, grounding her. Is everything all right? He asked, his eyes flicking to Adrian. Adrian's jaw tightened. It will be, when she finally lets me prove myself. Nathan's expression hardened. You had your chance. She survived without you, thrived without you. Don't come back now and pretend you're the answer. The 2 men stood toe-to-toe, different in every way. Adrian, polished and powerful but fractured. Nathan, weary but unwavering, the quiet rock who had carried them all. Elena's heart pounded. Two paths stretched before her, one safe, one dangerous, one built on years of loyalty, the other on a love twisted by betrayal and regret. Her son's laughter rang out then. Noah and Nathaniel barreled down the courthouse steps, their voices bright, oblivious. They rushed into her arms, their warmth anchoring her in the storm. "Mom, we're hungry," Nathaniel declared, grinning. Elena kissed their heads, blinking back tears. She looked up to find both men watching her, their faces mirrors of longing, of hope, of fear. That evening, back at the hotel, Elena stood by the window as the city lights blinked alive. Nathan sat at the table, reading with the boys. Their laughter filled the room, a balm to her ragged heart. But outside, across the street, she caught sight of Adrian, alone, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, looking up at their window. Not intruding, just waiting. Her chest twisted. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, torn in two. Nathan's voice floated from behind her. "Bedtime, boys. Come on." Their giggles faded into the bedroom, leaving her alone with the city, with the ache of choices she wasn't ready to make. Later, when silence blanketed the room, she whispered to the dark, "What do I do?" No answer came. Only the sound of her son's breathing, steady and innocent. She turned, watching them sleep. Their small bodies curled in peace. Her love for them was unshakable, her compass in every storm. But beyond them, the question loomed. Safety with Nathan, or the dangerous hope of Adrian's redemption. For the first time, she admitted the truth she had avoided for years. She didn't know, and maybe she didn't have to. Not yet. The story ended not with a choice, but with a beginning. A woman forged from fire, to boys who wore her heart, and to men whose love different, flawed, unyielding pulled her toward futures she could not yet choose. The dawn was fragile, uncertain, but it was hers, and that was enough.